All right, my secondary math 2 class, we are going to be continuing to talk about quadratic equations. Okay, so we have learned to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Okay, but we've also introduced a second way, which is called the quadratic formula. All right, so for numbers 1 and 2, it's asking us to solve these quadratic equations by factoring. Okay, so if we solve number 1 by factoring, that means we need to look at number 12 first. We need to look at our C coefficient. Okay, so if we're looking at number 12 first, I need to ask myself what two numbers multiply to give me a positive 12, but are going to add to that middle term of negative 7. Okay, so what two numbers? Well, let's try just a few. I know 2 times 6 will give me positive 12, right? 2 plus 6 is going to give me 8, though. Oof, darn it, that's not what we're looking for. Okay, well, maybe 3 times 4 will give me 12. 3 plus 4 will give me positive 7. Oh, darn it, we're looking for a negative 7. So that's one's not what we're looking for either. But remember, a negative times a negative still gives me a positive. Negative 3 times negative 4 still gives me positive 12. And when I add these two together, I get negative 7. And that is what we were looking for. Okay, so now that we found our two numbers that work, we can write it in factored form, which is x minus 3 times x minus 4. And then we just bring down that equals 0. Okay, we have to bring down that equals 0 because we need to take each one of these pieces and set it equal to 0 in order to solve. So I'm going to take my first piece, which is x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, in order to get x by itself, I need to get rid of this minus 3. Well, what is the opposite of minus 3? It's going to be to add 3. Okay, so x is going to equal positive 3. That is going to be my first answer. But remember, in quadratics, we always get two answers. So now we need to take our second piece, x minus 4, excuse me, equal to 0, and solve. Okay, so if I need to get x by itself, I need to do the opposite of minus 4. What is the opposite of minus 4? It's going to be to add 4. So now I get x equals positive 4. Okay, remember in quadratics you can always say, well, the opposite of negative 3 is positive 3. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. Beautiful. Okay, let's look at number 2. So remember, whenever we are trying to solve quadratics, it must equal 0. So let's write this note on our paper again. Must equal 0 in order to solve. Super important. Because this one does not equal 0 yet. So in order to make it equal 0, we need to move these two terms over to the same side as my m squared. Okay, so let's look at our 5m first. So what is the opposite of positive 5m? How am I going to move that? It's going to be to subtract it, or negative 5m. Okay, so it's going to move him over there. Okay, well, what is the opposite of negative 4? It's going to be to add 4. That's going to move him over there. Okay, so I have m squared that was already over there, minus 5m plus 4 equals 0. And now I can go ahead and factor it in order to solve because it equals 0. Okay, so the number we need to look at is positive 4. So I need two numbers that are going to multiply to give me positive 4, but are going to add to give me negative 5. Okay, what are these two numbers that multiply to give me a positive 4, but are going to add to give me a negative 5? Okay, well, I know 1 times 4 is going to give me positive 4. 1 plus 4 is going to give me positive 5. So close. We want a negative 5. So what I'm going to do, negative 1 times negative 4, and that's going to give me my negative 5. Okay, so now I can write it in factored form. I have m minus 1 times m minus 4, and we break down our equals 0. Okay, once we've written it in factored form, we can now take each piece and set it equal to 0 in order to solve. So m minus 1 equals 0. Okay, well, what is the opposite of minus 1? How do I get rid of that minus 1? I'm going to add it. So my first answer, m equals 1. Now I need to find my second answer, so I take m minus 4, set it equal to 0. Okay, what is the opposite of minus 4? It's going to be to add 4. So we know our next answer is m equals positive 4. And there we go. Remember, in quadratics, we always get 2 answers. Okay, so on numbers 1 and 2, we were solving quadratic equations by factoring them. Okay, but factoring isn't always going to work. There will be some equations where you simply cannot factor it. Okay, and that is where the quadratic formula comes in. Okay, so the quadratic formula, for number 3, it's asking us to just simply copy down the quadratic formula. Okay, so the quadratic formula is, I'm going to do this in black, is x is equal to negative b plus or minus, which is where we get our 2 answers from, the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, and all of that is divided by 2 times a. Okay, I won't play it, but there are a couple of really annoying songs. If you want to YouTube it, it will make you memorize this formula in no time. Okay, so number 3, we copied down the quadratic formula. Hopefully you have somewhat gotten this memorized by now. So number 4, it's asking us to identify the part of the quadratic formula known as the discriminant. Okay, the discriminant. Okay, the part of the quadratic formula known as the discriminant is the b squared minus 4 times a times c part. Okay, it is this part right there. Okay, so last time we practiced a lot of just solving for the discriminant. Today we're going to solve for the discriminant again, but then we're also going to solve for the whole thing, because really the discriminant is the biggest, probably the hardest part. Once we do that, it's pretty easy from there. Okay, so let's go ahead, and for numbers 5 through 8, it's asking us to find the value of the discriminant of each quadratic equation. Okay, so we're just solving for the discriminant. So these quadratic equations are all written in standard form. Okay, and make this note on your paper. Standard form is always written as ax squared plus bx plus c. Sometimes it won't be an x, sometimes it'll be an a, some other letter, doesn't matter. Okay, so if these are all written in standard form, we need to identify our a, our b, and our c. Okay, so if we're identifying our a, our b, and our c, and this is written in standard form, that means my a, b, c. Okay, now we can identify our a, our b, and our c. So a is going to be the coefficient in front of your variable squared. So my a is 9. Okay, my b is going to be my variable in front of just the 1, or my coefficient in front of just the 1 variable, which is going to be 9. And my c is going to be -9. Okay, well, once we have identified that, we can go ahead and plug it into our formula. So our discriminant is simply b squared minus 4 times a times c. And I'm just going to leave spaces where the a's, the b's, and the c's are, because now we know what the a's, the b's, and the c's are. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill it in. So the first spot is b squared. My b is 9. Minus 4 times a, my a is also 9, times c, which is -9. Okay. So we're going to solve this in pieces. First piece I'm going to solve is going to be 9 squared. Okay, what is 9 squared? It's going to be 81. Okay, I know I'm going to subtract the next part. And if you want to do this next part in a calculator, you're more than welcome to. I'm going to. So I have 4 times 9 times -9. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 4 times 9 times -9. And that's going to give me -324. Okay, well, what happens when I have 81 subtract a negative? What happens with this double negative? Turns to a positive. Okay, so now I can say, what is 81 plus 324? And I get 405. And there is my discriminant. We just solved for the discriminant piece. Okay, so let's do number 6. So if I have A, B, and C, we can now identify these guys. A, B, C. Okay, so my A is going to be 2. My B is 4. And my C is 8. Okay, now we can go ahead and plug it into our discriminant piece. So b squared minus 4 times a times c. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug it in. So b squared, so my b is 4, minus 4 times a, my a is 2, times c, which is 8. Okay, so we're going to solve this in pieces. 4 squared, or 4 times 4, is going to give me 16. Okay, I'm going to subtract the next piece, which is 4 times 2 times 8. And if you want to do this on your calculator, you're more than welcome to. Okay, 4 times 2 times 8. That's going to give me 64. Okay, then I have 16 minus 64, which is going to give me -48. And there is my answer. Just solved for the discriminant. Okay, so let's go ahead and zoom in on number 7. So we're going to do the same thing, identify our A, our B, and our C. So A, B, and C. Okay, so my A is 5, my B is 4, and my C is 7. Okay, so now that I know my A, my B, and my C, I can plug it into my formula. So I have B squared minus 4 times A times C. Okay, so we have B squared, so 4, minus 4 times A, my A is 5, times C, which is 7. Okay, we took our A, our B, and our C, and we plugged it in where it goes. So now we can solve this in pieces. 4 squared, or 4 times 4, is 16. Subtract the next piece. Okay, our next piece is 4 times 5 times 7, which is 140. And what is 16 minus 140. Give me negative 124. Beautiful. Okay, last example where we're just solving for the discriminant. Okay, so I have my A, B, and C. A, B, and C. Okay, so my A is negative 5. B is 8, and C is 3. Okay, so I can go ahead and plug it in where it goes. B squared minus 4 times A times C. So my B squared, right? B comes first, so my B is 8 minus 4 times A. A is negative 5 times C, which is 3. Okay, first piece, 8 squared. 8 times 8. It's going to give me 64. Subtract the next piece. My next piece is 4 times negative 5 times 3, which I'm going to do in my calculator. 4 times negative 5 times 3. It's going to give me negative 60. Okay, well, what happens when I have this double negative? 64 subtracted negative turns into a positive. And then 64 plus 60 is going to give me 124. And there we go. Okay, so we were just solving for the discriminant, just a piece of the quadratic formula in numbers 5 through 8. On numbers 9 and 10, we're actually going to solve the whole thing. Okay, so the first thing we want to do, always, is identify our A, our B, and our C. Okay, so for number 9, our A is 1, because it's right in front of the m squared. Our B is 4, and our C is 3. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug it into our entire quadratic formula. Okay, so I have x is equal to negative b, but leave a space, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, which we were just practicing on solving, all over 2 times a. Okay, so we just left spaces. So we have negative b comes first. So 4. Plus or minus b squared, so 4 again, minus 4a, my a is 1, times c, which is 3, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, so let's just solve for the discriminant. Okay, so I'm going to take this piece and we're just going to solve for this right here. Okay, so I have 4 squared, which is going to give me 16, minus 4 times 1 times 3. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 3 is 12. So inside of there is 16 minus 12. Okay, so what is 16 minus 12? It's going to give me 4. Okay, so let's go ahead and rewrite it. So I have x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus the square root of 4. Okay, we know that whole piece turned into a 4, all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. Okay, well, what is the square root of 4? We know the square root of 4 is just 2. Okay, so we can actually rewrite this as x is equal to negative 4 plus or minus 2 over 2. Okay, so now this little piece right here, this plus or minus, this is what gives us our 2x answers. So I have my first answer, as x equals -4 plus 2 over 2. Okay, so we're going to solve our first answer first. Okay, what is -4 plus 2 on top? -4 plus 2. It's going to give me -2. Okay, 2 on bottom. Well, what is -2 divided by 2? It's just -1. Okay, we found our first answer. What about our second answer? Okay, we have x is equal to -4 minus 2 over 2. Okay, let's go ahead and solve this one. Okay, on top I have -4 minus 2. What am I going to get? -4 minus 2. It's going to give me -6. Okay, well, what is -6 divided by 2? -3. So my two answers for number 9 were -1 and -3. Okay, awesome. Let's do one more. Okay, even though we kind of ran into its space, that's okay. So we're going to identify A, B, and C. Okay, I'm going to fill out my formula. X is equal to -b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Okay, so let's go ahead and fill in these spaces. -b comes first. What is my b? It's going to be -1. Okay, -1 here again. 4 times A. My A is just +1. My C is -2. All over 2 times A, which is just 1. Okay, so first thing, let's solve for this discriminant right here. Okay, so we have 1 squared, or -1 squared, minus 4 times 1 times -2. Okay, well, what is -1 squared? What's -1 times -1? That's just 1. Okay, we're going to subtract the next part, which is 4 times 1 times -2. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. Okay, what is 1 minus a -8? Double negative turns into a positive. 1 plus 8 is 9. Okay, so we figured out this whole piece inside of there is just a 9. Okay, so let's go ahead and rewrite it. So we have x is equal to, what happens to this double negative? Turns into just +1. Plus or minus the square root of 9 over 2. Okay, what is the square root of 9? That is just 3. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus 3 over 2. Okay, so now we can figure out, in fact, I'm going to write some lines here, knowing that that one was on the other one. Okay, so now we can figure out our two answers. Our first answer is x is equal to 1 plus 3 divided by 2. Okay, what's 1 plus 3 on top? 4. What's 4 divided by 2? 2. So our first answer is 2. Okay, now our next answer is 1 minus 3 over 2. What is 1 minus 3 on top? -2. And what is -2 divided by 2? -1. And there we go. Okay, I know it's a lot. It's a ton of work just to get 2 little answers, but this method always works solving quadratics. All we got to know is what our A, B, and C is and plug it into our formula to solve. Okay, you guys have an assignment that goes with this.